right. Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and tonight it's Trio Thursday. It's Thursday Night Trio with Professor Hamamoto and George Webb. And, well, it's been a very crazy week for everybody. I'm here in the studio. We've been actually doing some physical work with Andy here, shifting a whole lot of stuff around for me, trying to improve the possibility of me finding things when I need to look to find them, so I can get my my book written. And this is a essential task that we've been putting together with the help of Andy, and of course all the people at the charrette helped a lot with that too. But I'm getting down towards June the 6th when I'm planning to have a memorial celebration of my dad's life. And so I want to have something written by then, and feeling a little bit of pressure. But George Webb, you know all about writing books. So let's start with you. I know you've got a lot of that going on.
Well, I had a great model. I didn't know you could write historiography, which is basically going in and looking at all the data in a fresh way and writing different conclusions because the data that is out there doesn't support the narratives we have. For instance, you know, there's Antifa all over in January 6th. There's Proud Boy informants everywhere you look. There's Oath Keeper, FBI informants everywhere you look. It's not a riot by Trump people. It's a riot by FBI informants, right? That's historiography, but it's telling the truth rather than a false narrative. And the #1 expert in the world in historiography, bar none, if you want to talk about Asian studies or cultural studies, is none other than Dr. Hamamoto. So I had a great mentor, and I'm just playing it. I'm just playing it down the fairway, using his swing, man.
Well, thank you very much, George. But let me take this opportunity to congratulate you on your most recent offerings. I really like the cover art here. I don't know if you can disclose who the artist is of the portrait. This is in New Orleans, FBI informant. And I see you have pictures of people like Tyrone and Decode, and you've got, you know, Jason, all the people that were at the charrette. And yeah. I have 2 of these. One's a working copy. The other one's a legacy copy. This goes in with my Bitcoin stash. You know, just kind of magic. In truth, I really don't have Bitcoin. I invest in these instead. And this is NATO's little shop of beep.
Yeah, can't say virus. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to going through them, and it's always fun to get them, you know, delivered by Bezos.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know what? I am prejudiced towards the paperbacks. I do get the you know, when I can't wait, I get the ebooks or the Kindle. But, you know, I'm into word magic, right?
Yeah.
It's called Kindle for a reason. I don't want your books to be kindling for Kindle. So that's why I'm prejudiced towards there's a rational reason for that. It's not just because I'm old school. It's just practical survival tactics.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things about being grounded and having my Patreon taken away by the State Department is that it forced me to go home and write. And I had about 8 books that were about 9/10 done. I had a book about Team Evergreen Aviation. John has been helping me with the Evergreen Aviation plane down there at National Harbor. And I had this Team Evergreen thing almost done. And then this last, you know, sometimes there's a news event that kind of trips and gets you to write the last chapter. And that was this Evergreen ship that was in the Suez Canal. So I got a book out about Evergreen, and then this book behind me, which is Spray It in Dutch, is about this is the eyeball there. You can see looking at you as he's passaging rat virus and bat virus into humans at the Erasmus lab. So that's my latest one. And then I managed to write a book about writing books, and I called it Not in Your Grandmother's Basement. So I was able to complete that. And yeah, so it's been a good week. This forced, lockdown, even though 4 books were banned, I put out 4 more. So I'm not giving up.
Wonderful. Congratulations again, George.
Yeah. And I wanted to say Go ahead.
I was just going to ask Professor Hamamoto, are you in the midst of writing anything right now? I treasure your Servitors of Empire so much. I wonder if you're in the middle of doing a new book, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm going to follow George Webb's material here with some notes that I'll publish with graphics, and some of them are drawn from George's. They're screenshots from George's material of last year as this is beginning to break. So that's not going to be lost to to the memory hole. And it's going to be a short book, but it's kind of like a literary experiment. It's not like just a bunch of gray text there, right? It's going to be broken up by a not just a timeline, but graphics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in the offing. Just today, I was sharing with the people in the live stream about this project that I've been working on for a number of years on Robin Williams, right? And I made the assertion today that Robin Williams turned out to be a targeted individual because he had a crisis of conscience once he was going on these USO tours in 2005. And he this particular performance in 2009. And the reason I mentioned that, John and George, is because George made a remark about this character, Bill Harvey. Is this the same guy, Bill Harvey?
Yep.
You made the observation, I think it was a really keen observation about how, I guess it was John F. Kennedy or was it Bobby Kennedy, kind of impugned his manhood about making fun of him not being very popular with the ladies. Is that? And you said at that moment, Harvey probably said, I'm going to kill this mother, or whatever. And sometimes it's that trivial. Mm-hmm. Sometimes history can turn on a really, really trivial, I mean, in retrospect, encounter such as that. And that is really what got me to rethink Robin Williams's death. And he died of I don't know if it was autoerotic strangulation, but by hanging in 2009. So I think what he did is he went on these USO tours, and in this particular performance, 2009, he's talking about, get this, Bush, Cheney, and the Obamas, the Clintons. These are all routines now in D.C. This was done in D.C. He went right into the den of the lion, so to speak. And track number 3 is a whole routine on hybrids and animals. This is in 2009. An intelligent design, track 12. I mean, it goes through all of it. So I think he had a crisis of conscience. And looking at his career, he came from an elite background. His great-grandfather was the governor of Mississippi. And his father was a high-level executive with Ford in the luxury division, Lincoln Mercury, who retired to Marin County, which is upper middle class. It's beyond upper class. It's elite in the Bay Area, which, by the way, was also the area where Tupac Shakur was initiated into that and elevated through his own particular genre, rap, hip hop, and all that. So to answer your question, John, in a sort of a roundabout way, these are the types of connections the threads I'm trying to bring together in concert with our discussions here.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I've had suspicions, and I've occasionally looked a little bit at Robin Williams. And one thing that I always stands out at me is there's a picture of him as a very young man, sitting on the ground with a monarch butterfly on his nose, and he's just looking up at this butterfly on his nose. And to see that speaks volumes to me, because the whole monarch program. I'm afraid that he was unfortunately probably part of it at an age too young to have any possible choice about it. And that makes a pretty unhappy kid and a pretty unhappy life.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen that picture.
Yeah, maybe Andy can. Oh, Andy's got it up there. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, yeah. Good job, Andy.
Yeah, that's not the only one. There's a few of them, but
Okay.
yeah, you're only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it. Yeah, just a little weird. And I am sorry for all of the people. There's so many of the people that grow up in Hollywood that never have a choice.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
they can jump off the carousel at any time of their choosing if they decide to do so. I think Robin Williams did decide to do that, and he sealed his fate in the same way that once our beloved martyred President John F. Kennedy really saw what was going down, he decided to face reality. And same with Bobby Kennedy. They realized the enormity of the, and you know, I think President Trump also had that moment as well. I don't think he really understood the enormity of what he was up against until he was deep into it. And no matter how much you explain, you can read all you want about you know, the bloodlines of the Illuminati or read all the Masonic literature. You don't really understand that you're into it until it's almost too late. I mean, even people like our childhood reading man here, Jules Verne,
Mhm.
incredible, a native French speaker, by the way. He was read in very early,
Yeah.
and he also had a period of decline, very reminiscent of Robin Williams, deep depression. And the way we're told, it becomes a psychiatric problem, right? That's what the medical pharmaceutical establishment, that's how they want us to understand it. I see that is a symptom of a deep spiritual malaise, a, a crisis of conscience, a spiritual crisis. They try to say, "Oh, it's because his hormones are wrong, or there, you know, there was some kind of uh, mix up in his neurons, right?" And that's an utter diversion. It really goes back to the fight of over the human soul, the battle between good and evil, which is biblical, of course. And of course, you know, we don't talk about that, or we're led to believe that it's not science, nor is it part of the humanities anymore. What we have now is the inhumanities, the biopolitics. We have Michel Foucault, who, by the way, was you know, there's a doppelganger banger type of phenomenon here. As I was going to be talking about Michel Foucault, who does Breitbart put up there? Is it Breitbart? They put up our friend Milo Yiannopoulos as a big distraction. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of these characters who keep doppelganging us and distracting us from these issues. Michel Foucault is a serious thinker who has ushered in a post-Hungarian regime because Kissinger was into geopolitics. Michel Foucault is a theoretician of biopolitics, right? Getting down to the engineering of the human genome. And this is what's being celebrated in the history departments, the behavioral sciences, socioanthropology, all of it, in the law schools. And when all these people have been inculcated with Foucauldian thought, of biopolitical thought, who are running our country and running our world. And these guys like Jules Verne come right out of the French esoteric tradition. And there was one individual at Stanford by the name of Rene Girard, who had a spiritual crisis as well. And he returned to the church. He returned to the Catholic Church as he realized as an academic that he was handed this opportunity to leave France and as a 23-year-old to start getting a succession of academic plum positions, endowed professorships. That's the track that these guys are on. So he had a crisis of conscience, and when he died, he was an utterly broken individual. And he lived to about 93, 94. And guess who considers him a mentor? Rene Girard of Stanford University Humanities. None other than Peter Thiel, or Thiel as we know him.
Interesting.
Yeah, they like to hang their little their schemes on these figures, even though they're not really directly involved. It gives them credibility. So anyway, that was you know, to answer your question, John. I'm in on a very, very deep quest here. and it keeps going back to the Knights of Malta and the Rennes de Chateau and southern France and the Templars and the Rosicrucians and all of these people. Jules Verne was right out of that milieu. It's incredible. None of this is accidental.
That's
Yeah,
really
Jules Verne was a Fabian too, which ties right in with my last couple of shows. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what fun that we have on this show where we get to talk about all these DoD programs for knocking the average guy down. It's so good that they take our taxes and spend it this way. But my theory, and there goes Rahm Emanuel, somebody working for Rahm. My theory has always been that the MK Ultra, the reason why they dropped Artichoke and Bluebird and MK Ultra, it works for stars because you'd have to do the mind control, all that, but it doesn't really scale for the everyman. It's too much. It's too much,
Mm-hmm.
something that could scale. And that's where I think out of the 50s, they transitioned to this, like you say, the Foucault type thinking, which is the bio domination. Weaken somebody's resistance first with aerosolizing AIDS. What a great idea that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can aerosolize all the other stuff that you were working on in the Nazi labs, and then you take them out. And then you have this kind of protection of proxying and deniability that you didn't do it. And I think of John's dad as the primary example, where you couldn't do a McDuff for every person in America. It's too high touch, and it takes too long. They need something that will work in the millions in the scale. And so that's where I think I'm reading this guy right now, this guy named Nicholson Parker. And he reminds me so much of John and I at the National Archives pawing, for information about these different programs like that McDuff was involved in. And it's in the same area. It's in these chemical weapons and biological weapons at Fort Detrick. And of course, McDuff gets involved with, he becomes a victim of this horrific stuff that Sidney Gottlieb is doing, the poisoner in chief. But this guy, I always try to find people who did the digging before me, so I don't have to do it. And he did the digging into these programs, and he identified this operation called Operation Baseless that the Air Force had. And the idea was that we're going to go away from planes, and hopefully we'll go to some really small thing that doesn't require a base, like a drone.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can spray these things from anywhere, and we will no longer need bases. So this Operation Baseless. So this story came out last year, and I really enjoy this guy, the way he's writing it, because I believe this is where we are in the Foucault, game plan.
Right, the biopolitics as a continuation of the geopolitical. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It follows. You look at the whole drone kill program, Task Force Orange. Try it out and get it paid for in Afghanistan and Iraq and the war on terror. And now you're ready to go after the average guy. And in this new expression that has become my favorite expression, at FEMA band camp. There's an expression. Yeah, well, there's an expression. There was this one gal that became famous saying, and I remember this one time at band camp. If you don't know that meme, it's hard. It doesn't ring, but FEMA band camp is when we all get shipped off to FEMA. At least we'll have people that are musicians, and so it'll be FEMA band camp.
Grim.
That reminds me of my studies of the Battle of Stalingrad, and there's a great film of what happened to the generals, Paulus and the German generals that got captured. And they ended up staying in this really nice compound. The common soldiers, of course, they starved them. But the generals had a pretty good life, and there's pictures of them, and they all had accordions and violins, and they had a big orchestra there. And of course, that is one of the saving graces of humanity, is when it gets right down to it. if you can find a way to make some music, you can pass the time, and express your humanity in that way. Doesn't cost anything, it's very common. You find that. I have a book that I really like a lot called well, it's about Andersonville Prison in South Carolina, and about this fellow that was from Pennsylvania that got captured by a Yankee, got captured by the Confederates, and he played the fiddle. And so at this horrible camp where people were dying daily, they were still having square dances, and the guys would divide up between men and women, and he would play the fiddle. This idea of music at Auschwitz, the theme of music, I think is always going to be part of our work. I know that you guys are all, both in your own way, great music lovers.
Yeah, John, this is only slightly off topic, but I've been meaning to ask you this question since you're of the opera world, and also you're part of the LaRouche network. But are you familiar with the controversy that was taken up by Mrs. LaRouche, saying that we need to get off the 440 standard pitch and get into, I guess it's 430. It's known as the Verdi standard pitch. He was a staunch advocate of going to the 430. Is it 430? I can't remember.
It's
Hertz.
432.
432 hertz as opposed to 440.
Yes, that's right.
So what is your can you ask Mrs. or the people in the LaRouche, are they still, because I know Lyndon LaRouche is very much involved with classical music and trying to promote it as a form of learning and epistemology, as sort of a counter politics to all the degradation that we're being bombarded with daily. So I wonder if you had any insight about that. As an opera singer, for example, I saw a YouTube deal where this one guy who was, I can't remember his name, said, yeah, well, if I'm at standard pitch 440, I have to go into a range that I was not trained for. And it's straining my voice, and it's ruining my career. And it's not the way that composers intended. And they were very, very aggressive about getting back to the Verdi pitch standard.
Well, politics aside, it's between the singers and the violinists, okay? And if you're an orchestra leader, then you generally are going to be hiring the singers, which means that you are going to set the pitch that makes the violins sing the most beautifully, and that is the higher pitch, whether it's 440 or 444 or somewhere on the higher side of the note A. And if you are a singer, then you want to sing it at the pitch that was the pitch when it was composed. It's composed for the human voice. The human voice hasn't changed, in 50 or 100 or 200 years. It's the same voice. So when Verdi was writing, he was 432, and there was places all over Europe that we're all over the place, from lower than that and way higher than that. Again, it depended upon the whoever was hiring the orchestra and the singers at the time. Now, after the Nazis came in,
Oh, gosh.
decided to just kill everything but 440. So that 440 is survived and is now the standard pitch all around the world. And while it makes the violins sing beautifully, it's not good for the human voice to be trying to sing something that is really designed for almost a half a note. From the difference between an A and an A sharp, about half between there is how much we're talking about. And when I'm singing, I did the last time I did Magic Flute, we did it at 432.
Oh,
it was beautiful. It was so comfortable. 440 is higher, and I agree absolutely with the comments you said.
well, all my music from hereafter is going to be done at 432.
Yay!
This is a tuner, 432 hertz. You can get it to adjust it to the Verdi tuning.
Yeah. Oh, and Lyndon LaRouche was in Italy one time, and you can see him on a YouTube making that with some eminent Italian musicians making that very point about Verdi, about if you sing it at 440, you're not going to get the sound. You're not going to get the resonance. The body resonates at certain frequencies, and the 440 is not a multiple of very much, maybe 11, 4 and 11, right, or something like that. But 32 has a whole lot of built-in resonance potential. Maybe that's not real science, but it feels that way.
No, I think it has these ratios. That it's the Fibonacci sequence, right? You know, like the chambered nautilus. It has and George, this relates to, not even abstractly, but concretely. It relates to the whole question of energy. We're talking about energy here, but in this case, we're talking about one expression of which is sound waves. But we're also getting it through, visually as well. This is all part of the biopolitical takeover of our sensorium, which gets down to even popular music. That's what you're hearing on iTunes all the time. You're hearing these these algorithmic expressions of control. And you're right, George. Picking individuals out and putting them through MK Ultra Monarch is really labor intensive. Why not just make people pay for it on iTunes and get Jimmy Iovine to curate whoever it is out there that they want to promote at a certain frequency level?
Well, I think, I know so little about music that I could listen at 432 or 440, it's only 8 minutes later, so, I'm 420 if you press me, but I think I'm really fascinated. You go up the frequency spectrum to the Lena Poo area of the spectrum and the 5 gigahertz and 6G and 7G. And that's when things really start happening. But I do think there is this idea of, the Greeks had the wave theory. And I do think they might not know what they're doing, this cabal, I like to say NATO Nazis, but whoever they are outside of the NATO Nazis, they still are putting their chips on this. And I don't know if 5G is okay or not. It doesn't seem like the SARS numbers are too bad for the phones. But there's something there with Internet of Things in terms of biosurveillance. There's something there about if we really want to create a green passport, a vaccine passport, like you were saying the other day, I need to know where you are all the time in real space so that I saw a funny video from Australia where you could be fined on your phone from the government by other people turning you in, and they could take a picture of you littering. And if you just drop something accidentally, it automatically would shut your car down. So you couldn't drive until you paid the fine, and you couldn't go into a restaurant or you couldn't go anywhere, meet with anybody until you paid all these fines that kept accumulating. And it does seem like this 5G, if it isn't biological, as far as somehow, activating some kind of virus, at least it's biosurveillance, at least it's Internet of Things. And I definitely see that they take every physical phenomenon and use it to the advantage of biosurveillance. Absolutely.
And that was, by the way, one of Foucault's hobby horses: surveillance, discipline, punish. He wrote extensively about it, and he was promoted relentlessly through all the intelligence agencies and all the elite institutions, all the Ivy Leagues, right? Yale, Harvard, UC, outside of the Ivy Leagues, Johns Hopkins, particularly. That's where they brought René Girard to kind of demonstrate his worth to the people who are going to bring in the whole biopolitical concept to replace the geopolitical.
I really do believe that these two things have merged. The Kissinger geopolitical, I call it Kissinger's chessboard, with the Internet of Things. They've decided that Internet of Things is going to be the way they know where everybody is on the chessboard. And so I think, Foucault is correct in this, because we've become so dependent on the cell phone for everything, that it is the perfect thing to backdoor, as far as reams of information about somebody every day. And you can use AI on the thing. So not only getting the communications, but who you meet with. And then at what point do they say you met someone who, or ran into somebody within 6 feet that had COVID and you must go get tested? And there was a gal on CNN today that was saying, we have to, even though people are being vaccinated, you have to keep not letting people enjoy restaurants. Otherwise, they won't have a reason to go get the vaccination. They'll start enjoying these freedoms without going and getting the vaccination. And it was just like, oh, this is the strategy. It's just make you a total lockdown unless you comply with the vaccine. And I'm all for vaccines. I'm all for safe vaccines and not rushed vaccines where they don't even know what it is, don't have a clue what it is. They might have tested it on some Chinese prisoners and had some bad results, but they went ahead with it anyway.
Or there's pseudo vaccines, right? Like mRNA.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
mRNA,
an operating system, correct?
Yeah, exactly. mRNA reminds me exactly of Bill Gates taking over the fledgling computer market, and where you had a lot of different operating systems and a lot of different startups. And they were rushed in there and said, we don't really care about doing anything of any value. We just want to be the middleman. And Gates with Event 201 is the same thing for this whole CRISPR world and the whole biological world. Is like, we're gonna come in and make the rules of how the chips are gonna work and how the biosurveillance is gonna work. And you have to plug in and you have to give a backdoor to us for all your information from your biosurveillance, from your testing. And we're going to be the operating system. We're going to be the middleman on all vaccines going forward, all viruses and vaccines. And if you look at the World Health Organization, if you go to @WHO.int, look whose name there is that you send in your proposals to for your vaccine. It's only one name, begins with a B and ends with an I.
Now, we know who the other side are, but I'm also concerned about the people who are masquerading as being sympathetic with our perspective and our politics. Some of these individuals are well, you identified them, George. They were there on the scene on January 6th. But there's one individual who's come to my attention recently, and I think at the risk of alienating viewers, I'd like to issue not a warning, but just a heads up about this one individual who's going around claiming that the virus doesn't even exist. And he claims to be part of our movement, right, to try to advocate for rational testing and sound medical protocol. His name is Dr. Andrew Kaufman, medical doctor, and I think he has an academic appointment at Case Western. And he was on a show run by a fellow, I can't remember his name, interesting and a pretty well-versed individual up in Canada. And one of the people on the panel was our own Judy Mikovits. And he was really hammering into her. He really went into her, and he was kept on reiterating his claim that the COVID virus is non-existent. Your response, George? Andrew Kaufman. He's making the rounds there, and he's apparently, I was not aware of this until a friend of mine came on a camera on the Skype and proclaimed to me he fully convinced that there was no virus. And this is a intelligent, highly rational individual, but he had succumbed to the neuro-linguistic programming. So I want to issue a heads up to listeners here, because
yeah, I'm familiar with Kaufman. And,
you are?
Yeah, and he is definitely a person who doesn't buy into germ theory. He thinks that you get sick through the environment, through I can't remember what the alternative to germ theory is, but this is pretty much junk science. There is causal agents that cause you to get sick. They are bacteria, they are viruses. This is science. They do have genomes, they do have proteins. This is real science. And Kaufman is appealing to people who just don't want to pick up a book and don't want to learn it. And there's always going to be a group of people that just say, make it easy for me, and just say it isn't there. But I call these things shooting pens. I call these things entrapments.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to have people then try to radicalize this at the end after they get their flock of sheep. You know, it's Catcher in the Rye. They get the sheep, and then where they go? Right over the Irish cliffs. Once they get their flock of sheep, the shooting pen.
Yeah.
And Kaufman is just another one of those information operations. Whether he knows it or not, he could be just a useful idiot.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely agree with your warning there, as he's not someone we want to take seriously.
Well, he's gaining a lot of followers and he's picking up speed, right? This is very reminiscent of your allusion earlier, I think, George, about the guy who sounds rational up to a certain point until he starts talking about child slaves on Mars, right? And then, of course, that sucks the oxygen of any sort of truly oppositional movement or group. And it's intentional. I think these are straight out of Q psyops. This is the so-called Proud Boys and so-called Antifa, but from a supposed medical authority who has no lab experience, by the way. And by the way, if you can see that, I don't know, it's available. It's not on YouTube. I think it's on a website. But Judy Mikovits kicks his butt, right? And the guy who hosted the show kicked him off the panel discussion because he was disruptive and he was really doing the heavy, obvious NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, not for her benefit because Judy Mikovits is a lab scientist. She's done the work. But for us, for the viewer, like you say, the people who are so scared, they want an easy answer, an easy way out. They say, oh, yeah, of course, it doesn't exist. No problem over. Now I can go fishing again, you know?
Yeah. You know, these charlatans, I'm sorry, John, did you have something there?
Yeah. No, this is not my topic. I'm just going to listen.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, Steve Bannon has this guy, Kwok, and there's another billionaire, I believe, by the name of GUO, Guo. And he is in funding all these kind of information operations with Robert Mercer. And Cambridge Analytica is behind them, and they get all this money, and it's a really sad state of affairs. They've got a new one out that says a guy by the same last name, Guo, is the one who put the HIV into coronavirus and put the HIV inserts into coronavirus. There's another associate. This guy runs the casinos in Kuala Lumpur for Bannon, but he's been so close as an agent of all this stuff of giving U.S. secrets to China and then getting kickbacks into the U.S. Congress. It's not just DNC. It's both left and right, and Guo's one of them. I'll get the name of the other billionaire that Bannon is using to fund the bio side.
That's Miles Kwok, is it?
That's Kwok. Yeah, Kwok. His first name is it's also spelled Wengui. I'll get the spelling of the other guy, the other billionaire that funds these charlatans.
Right.
But it's the same thing Cambridge Analytica was. It's the shooting pen. It's get everybody in who likes Trump, and then get all the pigs in over the collapsing door, and then drop everybody 60 feet in the middle of the Capitol or whatever. And you call them out. You say it's going to happen, but then we save some, and we don't catch all of them. And so the Catcher in the Rye, the Donald Barr, with the hook gets, and Bill Barr type folks do catch some in the rye.
Yeah. John?
Well,
coming through the rye?
And I'm going to have to change the subject because I like that the critical analysis, but it's not possible for me as a non-scientist to really contribute much on that score. I do like to read people and that are trying to understand things. I I have made reference a few times to a writer, and he does most of his stuff on Facebook. Actually, his last name is Galilei, Gallalae, which I guess sounds a lot like Galilee. His first name is Kevin. And while I am fascinated by his writing about how it has been the church or churches over history that have basically controlled the population and have always had the power of, say, releasing a plague or something from here to there in order to just keep the civilization from, well, if mainly it historically, as we're told nowadays, it really was a question of famine, because you could only grow so much food on so much land, and if the local prince didn't have enough land to feed all the people, what are you going to do with all those people? Well, maybe you go to talk to the bishop and you say, well, we got too many people here, could you say a prayer and maybe something will happen? And then the people walk through the town with and suddenly people start getting sick. That's old religious population control, according to Mr. Galilei, and that has now been transferred from the church to the technicians. And this reflects the transfer of power from the priests and the church and the mystical side to the Freemasons and the builders and the bean counters and the Aristotelians, as we're told through the studies of the LaRouche folks, that have really identified the two basic philosophies of life of either there is nothing beyond what you can see, measure, count, and spend, or whether life is really an introduction to the next life, and the spiritual dimension is what you really should be looking into. If you don't believe in the spiritual dimension, then you can get yourself right into this Adam Smith economy that leads to Malthus and Malthusianism. And it is the elites right now that they have chosen to follow that technological solution to population. The church can't do it anymore, but the technology is built around the idea of what we've been told from the princes like Philip and others, that, hey, and this is what the Rockefellers say too, is there's just too much population and we're going to have to do something about it. So they have been, over the past decades, trying thing after thing after thing to subtly, behind the scenes, make those of us that they don't want to have here just kind of have shorter lives and perhaps be less productive and have less children and die young. That technological solution to what they see as overpopulation really reflects their choice not to follow the moral side, the spiritual side of life, and to just wed themselves to this mechanical, robot-like life of can I make money from this person, or is this person just in my way? And make that choice over and over and over again. Those are the people that have power in this world right now. And those of us that believe that life is much more than just the counting of dollars or beans or human beings, have got to stand up and take things back from these really just bloody murderers is what they are, just like the people that started World War I, World War II. These are people that do not love us. They want everything to themselves, and they don't care how they get it.
Well, John, I have to jump in there because you went right to the church conducting these, deciding who lives and who dies or who gets sick. And again, you go back to catcher in the rye. What grew on ryegrass? Ergot. And they actually used catchers to catch the ergot and remove the ergot, which became the poisons. And that's how the Puritans created submission within these women that didn't want to necessarily all sleep with Cotton Mather, and they ended up being Salem witch trials and so forth as crazy when they got the ergot poisoning. And here again is where I say this, you're talking about this Knight of Malta self-righteousness. Here again is where I think in the Irish potato famine, when the potatoes went bad by the infestans, pea infestans, what did they substitute in the Irish diet to make up? Bread, rotten bread, ergot bread. It exacerbated, I'm not saying it caused, but the ergot in the bread for the Irish potato famine exacerbated the Irish potato famine, caused legs to fall off, caused people to go crazy, caused numbness, all these things, hysterical behavior. And it's just what you do to your enemies. It's what Frank Wisner, who had the biological weapons program at the CIA, was doing with Sidney Gottlieb. And it's just a natural progression. And that's why I think this Catcher in the Rye, I'm not going to use that as a title. It's already been taken. But I do think that's their soul. As I'm quoting a guy here who ran a spy school for Kissinger in Oberammergau. It's the soul. Like you've talked about the soul of the machines. It's the soul of how they really want to deal with the commoners. They don't want to spend a lot of money. And they don't want to use nuclear weapons and destroy their buildings. They want bioweapons. They want that Catcher in the Rye. They want that ergot. And if you even look to the latest modifications to the bioweapons that Erasmus Lab is doing, right, you have an ergot-based modification that makes it impervious or makes it pathogenic and impervious to vaccines. And 3 of the 4 modifications, the amino acid is arginine. So it's RRAR, which is easy to remember, ROAR, but R means arginine. And that's, I believe, the ergot comes down. Maybe it's lysine, but anyway, you get the point. Here is their tip of the spear is this guy behind us, the Erasmus Lab. They're going to use bioweapons to put people down. They tried SARS. It didn't work that great. Too pathogenic. It didn't spread well enough. They tried MERS, a little less pathogenic, spread a little bit better. Now they've got their ideal bioweapon, their carrier, if you will. Their Catcher in the Rye. We got to be honest with ourselves. J.D. Salinger wrote a book about an adolescent wandering the streets. It had nothing to do with the real spirit, the spiritu of the CIA and Donald Barr and William Barr. It was Catcher in the Rye. And it was this poisoning as the scalable weapon against the common man.
In the post-war period. Now, George, in your research, did you ever find a connection between Erasmus Laboratories and Sandoz?
Yeah, well, all of the Nazi programs, the quickest border to get to, and also the safest one where Allen Dulles was Switzerland. And Sandoz, Sanofi is, they're all right there. Sandoz later, they release it, just south of the border in Mexico for the birth control pill, so that it gets into the United States and has easy approval. But if you look at all the Ciba-Geigy and all these other ones, they came right out of the Nazi experimentation in the Bavaria. Mm-hmm. And it still is a lot that way today with the virus vaccine game when it's all said and done.
Because it was Sandoz Laboratories that through Professor Hoffman, who synthesized LSD-25. Isn't that correct?
Another derivative of ergot.
Right.
Ergot.
The synthetic version of the ergot. Yeah. Who, by the way, our friend Aldous Huxley wrote a novel about the devils of Loudun, right? And he was part of this. John has been talking about the Fabian Circle. I don't know if he was directly involved with it, but he was in that milieu. He wrote a book about it, just like Salinger later on wrote Catcher in the Rye. He talked about this mass hallucination, and he attributed, of course, to the church, which had a double impact. One, it discredits the Catholic Church because he was a perennial philosophy guy, Huxley, right? Which means he was an atheist in essence. And then, secondly, it also previews this mass hallucinogen that's going to enslave humanity in the name of freedom. So that's The Devils of Loudun. Yeah, and it was great. It was made into a great movie with I think it was Oliver Reed. I think it was a Ken Russell film.
Yeah, I've been in that area, but I didn't stop in Loudun. I've been to Bordeaux and got on that side of France. But there was another attack by Porton Down with an ergot based. They blamed it on bread mold later on, but after World War II in the 50s, and I just can't remember the name of it right now. But this idea that this has been their ace in the hole really since, I don't know, maybe since the Irish potato famine, but at least since World War II.
Well, George, you said it goes back to the last battle of the Crusades, the Battle of Malta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It may go back all that far. It may go back all that far. The Catcher in the Rye may have been written by Donald Barr's great grandfather, or many generations before. But there is some stinky robeness about this, and I think it's going to be fun looking into it. I'm reading this novel baseless to try to get to some of these articles where McDuff may have been involved in in trying to shut some of these secrets going to Russia. Mr. Steve Bannon and Mr. Mercer, they're so good at giving the Chinese for kickbacks. Hopefully, we can research a real hero who tried to shut that channel down.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Well, I'll just make the point, Professor Hamamoto and George, that we discovered through the work of Stephen Kinzer in his book Poisoner in Chief, the reason why my dad would have been poisoned with a hepatitis, and that is because Sandoz had discovered that people who had hepatitis were like 10 times as vulnerable to LSD as the normal person. And so when you want to try to control somebody's mind, you want to try to do it with the drugs they were using. They were using THC. They were using adrenaline. They were using LSD, and probably a whole bunch of other stuff that we don't know. But
Saxitocin.
what is it?
Saxitocin or saxitocin, is that how you
Oh,
pronounce it?
well, that's the poison. That's the thing that kills you.
Right.
But the one that gives you hepatitis is the hepatitis A, comes from basically from dirty seafood that you gathered from a place that was already infected.
Well, in George's show today, we were doing, I was putting some song titles out there, which are predictive programming, and I cited Blue Oyster Cult,
Mm-hmm.
right? As in tainted oysters, saxitocin, right? Blue Oyster Cult, and their signature song is Don't Fear the Reaper.
Well, we talked about Aerosmith and how Aerosmith is a
Aerosol Smith.
Yeah, aerosol program, and Aerosmith has a song called "The Boogie Woogie Flu," and there's another one as well, like a pandemic song as well.
The Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu.
Yeah, Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu. Yeah. So, but it is kind of sad, but it is true that if you do have ergot poisoning in your parish, everyone's going to come to the priest to pray. I've been to Lourdes, in southern France, where everyone's coming as their last hope for, to pray. And it's awfully good for the church and those sacraments right there at the end. I don't want to be totally cynical about the Catholic Church, but I wasn't selling those indulgences when Martin Luther got upset. It wasn't me, folks. It was Martin Luther.
Well, let's just remember that it was Pius the 12th who went out there and validated that the story out at Lourdes, or the miracle, if you will, and the same Pope that issued the encyclical that said that while we oppose any medicine that threatens human life, it's okay if a medicine that is used to cure disease has a side effect affecting sterility. And that forms the basis of a lot of the justification that we have for these efforts to vaccinate people all over the world and in so-called third world countries, and include in that vaccine something they don't know is happening, and that's the sterilization gene that's snuck into the vaccines. That's going on. That's real. That's been proven. And when we consider vaccines and don't realize that they are willing to do that, to Africans, they're willing to do that to people of rare or places around the world where we never heard of. Are they not willing to do that to us? We have to confront the question.
Well, I'll leave it there. I couldn't have said it better myself, and I'll just keep writing books about it, and hopefully we'll break through.
All right,
Absolutely.
and George Webb, I think we've spent our hour again very, very quickly. Thanks again, guys, for being with us.
Thank you, gentlemen.
See you next week, if not before.
All right.
Thank you, Doc.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you, John.
Andrew, and thanks, Neighborhood News Studio, for helping us out with the great StreamYard productions.
Yes, thank you very much.